Welcome back, everyone. We hope you're well fed and well rested because we have a lot of tennis to cover. The Grand Slams are back. It's French Open time. We apologize for being a little late. Steve had to restart his computer a bunch of times. Is everything okay, Steve? Is the internet turned off in Australia? Are we going to be all right?
I think it's okay. I think my computer just had a little bit of a panic attack after what it's had to endure over the last 24 hours, but it's okay. We are here and we are ready to go, and it's going to be a pretty big fortnight of tennis.
I can't wait. How about you, Candace? Do you like the French Open? Where does this rank in your favorite Grand Slam tournaments, if you have to think about it real quick?
The French Open is the reason that I follow tennis. Yeah.
Aww.
You go back to when I guess I was a teenager. I always followed sports. I've always been a sports person. But I remember being a teenager and I was like an insomniac. Aren't we all sometimes? And I came downstairs at like 5 o'clock in the morning and I flipped on the TV and whatever channel my parents must have left it on NBC or whatnot. And it was the semis. It was Nadal against Federer. And, well, we all know that match. So it was a good one to be an introductory tennis. At the time, I obviously didn't know anything about Nadal. You probably didn't if you didn't watch tennis, exclusively. But I think any sports fan knew Federer was really good. And so to see him, getting beaten by this young kid, it sucked me in.
That's quite a start here. Let's jump in, and that's a good segue because we'll start with the men's side of the draw. What do you think, Steve?
Let's do it. I think we've got the first 16 players up on screen for those who are watching along.
Yeah, the top half of the first quarter here. Djokovic is our first seed. Goffin is down there in the middle of the first quarter. Some interesting names here in the middle, but it seems like it's Novak's section. What do you think, Candace?
I don't know. I mean, I want to say yes. It's just so difficult for me to gauge what his level is right now. I mean, it's easy, I guess, to say on the clay, but I just think in general, because we know he's a good clay court player. I'm sure some will take optimism from this week, but as we spoke about last week, this is kind of a glorified challenger that he's been in over at Belgrade too. Obviously Italy gave us a little bit more positives, but other than Tsitsipas, did he really have to face anyone too tough? And we knew Tsitsipas had been playing a lot of tennis leading into that. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh. I just think we've seen so much greatness from Djokovic on this surface in the past, and it's just clear he's not at that level. Does he have a kind draw? Should he be able to make it through this? Yeah. But it feels like every tournament he's been in during this clay court swing, whether he's made it through or not, he's had kind of one weird stumble. Even this week in Belgrade, he had one tight match that shouldn't have been a tight match. So it's going to be a matter of how he makes it through that, because I feel like I can pretty confidently say he's going to have a match like that here early, whether it's against, a veteran like Pablo Cuevas, whether it's against, I don't want to say Ricardas Barrancas, but somebody who's a solid clay court player. I think it's going to give him a little trouble, and it's how he's able to rise above that and come through. Djokovic of old, 100%. Djokovic of 2021, I'd maybe say 85%. And 85% probably good enough to still make it through this, but I have enough doubt to entertain other names if you were going to have me do that.
I agree with your overall sentiment that he doesn't look as good as he has in the past, but I do think he makes his way through this section and probably this quarter once we get down to the bottom half. But we'll stay here, Steve. What do you think, again, of these 16 players? Do you think there's anybody that can knock Novak off here before he gets to the quarterfinal?
I don't think so. I don't think so across best of 5. I think, yes, you can entertain basically every match beyond this section we have on the page. When you look at the outrights, obviously his price has blown out significantly since the draw because he is in the same half as Nadal. I guess there's 2 ways you can probably look at it. Is you can look at him kind of making his way through here, or he's going to do a massive favor for basically everyone in the bottom half of the draw and potentially taking out Nadal in the semi-final. So I think when you look at the 16 names on the screen, the players that could, maybe match it for a set or 2, it's still pretty slim. I guess you could probably go with Cecchinato, or Goffin's not going to do it. Mazzetti's not going to do it. Songa's not going to do it in 2021. It's really hard to make a case, but I think the second week it's going to get really difficult for him really quickly.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I tend to, again, I know that he's not in his best form, but like you said, Steve, if we're best of 5 here, I'm not sure that there's anyone here that really bothers me, but let's jump here into the bottom of the first quarter and see if there's anybody that sits down there. There is one big name. See if Steve's ready to click ahead. I thought I gave him enough time there with that pause. Mr. Federer is down there. Mr. Federer is down there at the bottom. We've got Berrettini at the top. A few sort of interesting names there, but at the end of the day, I look at this list and maybe Berrettini can challenge Novak, but I still am not totally inspired. What do you think, Steve?
Again, the same. I don't think of these players in terms of beating Novak and thinking about this from a quarter winner standpoint. I think the only name who could potentially challenge for a period is Matteo Berrettini. And the only reason I say that looking at this section here is that Novak versus Berrettini will be played on centre court. You know, looking at the weather conditions, you know, you could maybe make a case that, you know, if you could catch maybe playing Novak with the roof shut or in those kind of better, I guess, less harsh conditions on centre court. I think Berrettini could maybe make a case, you know, for redlining and being a threat. I think if he can get his forehand really working. The rest, though, it's really hard to make a case for anyone, and that includes Roger Federer. I just can't see. I can't see outside of Berrettini anyone here really challenging Novak come a quarterfinal. There's a few names there that would have been great to see them, you know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, but I just don't see it in 2021.
Yeah, it's tough. You know, Candace, again, you're ripe to pick against Djokovic. Is Berrettini the right guy? Maybe someone else here?
I lean Berrettini, which is a bad sign. When I saw this section, I had 3 thoughts. One was, ooh, Roger Federer, which I'm sure we all think that. 2 was, Dennis Istomin still plays tennis. And 3 was, I like Berrettini, but oh no, he's playing Taro Daniel, who always finds a way to make me sad. So I'll say Berrettini, but given he's playing off the bat, you guys know, me and Daniel, we don't have a good history. He tends to take me down when I get excited about who he's against.
Yeah, I agree. Berrettini is the name I'm picking here. Federer just, again, doesn't seem terribly interested in playing clay tennis. Lost his first match in his tournament in Geneva. We'll see how he does here. I think he can win a couple matches maybe, but it's not a terribly easy path from, you know, round 2 onward. So Berrettini probably takes a section, and I do think they beat Novak. So that's kind of how I see the first quarter shaking out. How about you guys? Anything to add on the first quarter in general?
Just this comment from Pat McCann around Fritz having Djokovic on the ropes in Melbourne. I think there were some pretty significant circumstances, I guess, around that match. That was the match where he was injured in the first instance and was obviously a little bit troubled, I think, by that. And also there was that weird period where after the 4th set, they kicked everyone out because of the lockdown. So it was a really weird kind of scenario. So there were a lot of other factors at play, and Fritz still couldn't beat him. And now you move to a surface that's more favourable for Novak, and it's hard to make a case, I think.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's jump into the second quarter. Again, we'll start with the top half here. Rafael Nadal, our 3 seed here, so he would have to play Novak in the semifinals instead of the finals like last year. A couple other names, but again, this is kind of the theme in men's tennis, and not to totally give it away, but we'll probably see a little bit of this in the women's side as well. But Candace, what do you think? Can anybody beat Rafa here?
I don't think so. I think he has a very comfortable draw. I think it's one of these draws people might make a big deal if, you know, someone like Sinner could make a run. It feels like we've wanted to see them a million times play each other. I don't see it. I don't see anybody here who's going to give him any difficulty. Obviously, he had, you know, the beginning of the clay court season, maybe there were a little bit of question, but not anymore. Not concerned for him at all. He's always been somebody in majors who kind of eases his way into a tournament. So you always want to make sure those first couple of matches in particular are kind, because he can find himself in drawn out early matches in majors. But this would be ideal. I think if you asked Rafa to fill in the draw himself, he'd put himself right in this spot.
It is a really nice section. Don't you think so, Steve?
I would agree. I think when you look at it, I mean, on paper, you could make a case maybe from the 3rd round onwards that we're looking at, you know, Sonego into Sinner maybe as the 3rd and the 4th round matches here. And yes, like there will be a little bit of hype around that, and we might get the Nadal Sinner rematch. But when you go back and you look at it, like, you know, there were doubts around Nadal coming into the French Open last year, and or not doubts, but I guess some question marks. And then he still got through it and didn't drop a set. Like it's that he's so far and away above everyone else that, you know, he's justified at his price, I think, here. You know, Popyrin, I think, had a four-game burst, I think, against Nadal the other week, and that was about it. I'm not seeing too much trouble there, but I think when you look through it, I think I'd be very surprised if Nadal wasn't advancing out of these 16 names.
And again, to make the point, it's best of 5 here, which makes it so much tougher for any of these people to upset Nadal. It will be really fun, hopefully, to watch that Sinner match there. I think it'll be competitive, but I do expect Rafa to move through this section and play whoever comes out of the bottom half of the second quarter here, which Steve will bring up in just a second, I'm sure.
I will, because there's some big names at the top of the draw here.
Well, there is one name that I know Steve wants to talk about, so we'll let you just dive in. I mean, how many matches is he going to win?
0. We're obviously talking here about Jensen Liu, who's using his protected ranking again. Good on him. Enjoy the payday and enjoy 3 relatively short sets, I would imagine, against Diego Schwartzman. Just to kind of touch on that, and I think when you look through it, I know Diego Schwartzman has had a pretty average 2021. This is a pretty good couple of, I guess, matches to start to find a little bit of confidence. I think the best of 5 suits him more than the best of 3. I think that's an approach that, you know, I think it will work for him. We obviously know that he does play well in Paris. I think here, when you look at it, I think Schwartzman from that top section, I think we'll get Schwartzman, Karatsev, and I'd probably lean maybe Karatsev based on their recent meetings. But then when you look to the bottom, you know, Andrei Rublev's the big name that stands out in this chunk here, but he's got a pretty tough match first up against Jan-Lennard Struff. I know the odds are heavily weighed in his favour, but he just seems a little bit short for my liking. I don't know if anyone else agrees with that.
I don't know. What do you think, Candace?
Yeah, I mean, I can see that he's a little bit short here. You know, when you're looking at this section of the draw right off the bat, I agree that the door is there for Schwartzman. It feels like we've been kind of grading on him this whole clay court season, but the early portion of his draw in particular is kind, you know, until he gets to Karatsev. I agree that Rublev is probably short just because none of his matches, I guess I would say, look overwhelming to me. Like, there isn't one where I'm like, oh, that's the one he loses, but they just all look tough. You know, you have Struff right off the bat. If he makes it through that, maybe it gets a little bit easier in round 2, but then you're looking at the winner of maybe, you know, Alcaraz, Lajovic, or Basilashvili if he's having a week, which happens every now and then. And none of those are overwhelmingly ones that you'd say, oh, Rublev loses, but they're not walkovers. Then you go from that to what, Karatsev or Schwartzman? I think it's tricky. I think it's tricky for Rublev. I put him to make it through this section, but he certainly is not somebody who I'd be betting on or advising anybody to wager on. I think he's a little bit protected for my liking, considering how many minefields are out there, I suppose.
And I think you make a good point with that around, you know, we need to remember in this chunk here, we're still in the same quarter as Nadal.
Yes.
we still, to get out of this quarter, you're then facing Nadal in a quarterfinal, and that's just to get out of the quarter. So you probably need to go looking at it, you know, maybe Nadal quarterfinal, Novak semifinal, then whoever it is out of the bottom half. So it's not like, you know, it's not a given past here. I think that the most interesting part about this section, I think, is probably Carlos Alcaraz, because I'm just curious to see how he goes across best of 5 on clay. He obviously dominated his way through qualifying to the point where some books had him in the outright markets before he'd even qualified, which was impressive. But I just don't see, I think if you make the best out of this, I don't see anyone probably challenging Nadal unless, I'm trying to think now, and I really can't see anyone unless...
Especially after they all kind of beat each other up like we talked about. I think Rublev maybe has a little easier path than you guys think, but again, he still has to beat Schwartzman or Karatsev just to get to Nadal. It's so hard to be here, and again, exactly like you said, Steve, whoever is in here has to beat Nadal and Djokovic. So again, same problem we had the first quarter. Anybody you like there has to beat Djokovic, then Nadal, just to get to the final. So it's just really tough sledding here.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything else from you guys in the second quarter before we jump into the third?
Let's jump on through to the third quarter.
Zverev at the top, RBA at the bottom, Khachanov in the middle there. A few kind of interesting pockets here, maybe, but overall, I'm not too overwhelmed by this quarter. How about you, Candace? I'm sorry, eighth.
Eighth. That's how we know this is such a big tournament. I actually like this one a little bit. But I think partially because we're finally getting away from Djokovic and from Nadal a little bit. I was drawn off to RBA right off the bat. I know he's another one that is like, if we had a list of people who've been in our overvalued players over the year, he would probably be a top 10er on that list between all of us together. But I think this is a kind of a sneaky, really nice for him. First match shouldn't be too much of an overwhelming issue. Second match shouldn't be a problem. Then you're looking against maybe Yuri Vesely or Khachanov. Again, winnable. And then, you're looking up towards the top. Someone like a Zverev, someone like a Laszlo Djere, someone of that nature. To me, that's winnable. I mean, I was looking through some of the odds, and this is a tournament that is difficult, I think, on the men's side to find value because it is such a top-heavy tournament, and because the clay court swing in general has been so formful for those top guys. And I guess I won't get too crazy into my case, but RBA appealed as one of the guys at much larger odds, and a lot of that for me is draw-driven.
Yeah, I like what you said there. He's a nice little sneaky pick to make it through this section into the quarterfinals. How about you, Steve? Who do you see coming out of here? Are you going to back Zverev at a Grand Slam?
No. I mean, the appeal basically from this section onwards is that we're on the opposite side of the draw to the big names. So that's about where the appeal ends, I think, for Zverev. I think when you look at his form, yes, he does have some decent clay form of late. Most of it has come at altitude. I actually think the draw on the surface isn't that easy early as it perhaps may be perceived by some. I think it's going to be a tough little pocket there. Looking to the bottom, and I do think that Bautista Agut is a player that is suited more so to the best of five, a little bit in the same way as Schwartzman. I think he can kind of grind down opponents a little bit more, and he is a little bit relentless, I guess, in that fashion, and has that ability to kind of stay locked in for hours and hours on end. The other name that does kind of stand out here, I've given too many chances to Khachanov, so I'm just not ever going to talk about him. I'm looking to Nishikori. I think, he's played a more limited schedule this year. He's obviously aware that injuries have been an issue. I think his best tennis has looked pretty solid. I think at times it's just about whether he can kind of sustain that. I think he can beat Giannessi in round one. I think he can knock off Khachanov in round two. And I think the winner of him and Bautista Agut in round three can come out of this little chunk here.
I agree with what you said. I'm excited to bet against Zverev, hopefully against any of those people. And Nishikori has the advantage, too, of having every other day off. You got to remember with these tournaments, they've got some time to recover. So even though he is playing 5-set tennis, he has some recovery time to get back through. But I think this is setting up nicely. So we'll get, either RBA or Nishikori there against Zverev. And I don't think Zverev wins that match. We'll see. Like you said, he hasn't just played well in these slow conditions. And there's someone who sits at the bottom of this quarter who's kind of interesting. I wish we could back him. At the bottom of the quarter is Mr. Dominic Thiem, who is really fun on clay for a while, was the guy who was going to replace Rafa Nadal here at this tournament. Steve, what do you think? I mean, he hasn't looked great. He's been very open about not being 100% healthy. This is kind of a manageable section here. If he makes it through these matches, maybe he faces Ruud there to get to the quarterfinals. What do you think of Thiem?
I mean, he's equal favourite in this quarter with Zverev in terms of progressing out of the quarter. It's just really difficult because he is that type of player who, and although I was critical of him playing all those exhibitions during COVID, he needs time on court. And I think he just gets used to and finds a rhythm over, 10, 20, 30 matches. And he becomes a little bit battle-hardened in that regard. And I just haven't seen, he hasn't been able to do that this year. He obviously hurt himself in Melbourne, or he had an injury that he carried into Australia. And then aggravated that in Melbourne and has really kind of struggled to find that consistency. And I think because he struggled to find that consistency in best of 3, it's really hard to make a case for that then in best of 5 here. That being said, Andahar first up and then either Albot or Delbonis in the second round, he has the chance to play himself into some form. But looking at this section, I'm actually moving towards kind of the top of this section. And if he can get past Benoit Paire in that first round, I think this is a really good spot for Casper Ruud.
It's interesting. I wonder if he's ready for best of 5 tennis. What say you, Candace? Everybody knows at this point that we're big Ruud fans.
Yeah, I think all 3 of us are big Ruud fans. I do see him making it through several matches in this span of the tournament. I mean, Paire is one of these days we're going to knock on Benoit Paire and he's going to make us pay for it. But you look to that as your first round match, like Steve mentioned. Second round, potentially third is maybe Davidovich Fokina or Hurkacz. You look past that, and I mean, probably one of the more fun early matches potentially we could have would be Ruud against someone like a Fognini. That could be really fun, or against Andahar. But we've seen him be capable of winning those types of matches. It's been a step forward we've seen from Ruud during the course of this clay court swing. Is he ready to make a major impression at this level over best of 5? I would have a lot of concern about that. But I see him making it through this portion of the draw nonetheless.
Yeah, I think for him to win this section, though, and face the top half of the quarter to make that quarterfinal, a team probably has to get knocked off. If he makes it this far, it probably is a sign that he's healthy and maybe in a little bit of form at this point. It is an easy section for team. It is a good spot for him to get some warm-up and find a little bit of form. And I don't know if Ruud's ready to beat him in best of 5. So it's tough for me to pick Ruud given the teams there, but I think it's going to be either one of them. And frankly, I feel good about them versus their chances of the top half of the quarter. I mean, do either you see, whoever you picked coming out of the top of the quarter beating, either team or Ruud here?
No, I think Ruud would start as a favorite, a fairly clear favorite over Bautista Agut or Nishikori. The only way that he wouldn't be a favorite in that quarterfinal was if it was Zverev. But I would say that would be a very winnable situation for him. I just like how much margin he plays with, how heavy he hits his ground strokes. And I think it is slowly coming together. He's just been a week at the Rafa Nadal Academy, just kind of tuning things up. He's looked pretty good the last couple of weeks. I think this is, again, it's when you look at the odds, yes, to win the quarter, they're probably not great to win outright or to make the final. It's just a great opportunity, I think, to try and find some of these bigger prices on the other side of the draw to Nadal and Novak.
Yeah. What do you think, Candace? Do you have the winner of Team Ruud beating RBA coming out of the top? I
do, yes.
Yeah, I think that's nice. Again, I've gone back and forth on this a lot, but I do think whoever it is, Team or Ruud, they'll take out whoever's at the top. Are we ready to jump into the fourth quarter?
Ready.
I think so, but as long as we start off by talking about probably the marquee matchup of the first round of the men's. It comes from this section. John Isner versus Sam Querrey. How excited are we?
Woo!
I will watch none of that.
Do you know what the best part is for America in this?
We're going to be forced to watch it.
The 2 of Querrey, Isner, Johnson, and Tiafoe are in the second round of Roland Garros.
Yeah.
Hooray.
Look at you. It's the future is here. The future of tennis.
Though, you know what? I do wish sometimes you were here, Steve, because I can almost guarantee you, as John Isner and Sam Querrey are duking each other out in the first round at Roland Garros, they were hard on him during Australia, and I think we're going to get more of it here in France. But I'll tell you what, those American commentators, they are ruthless on your buddy Lou. I think they're going to be hammering him that whole match because that's basically in Australia, that's all they did. Anytime it was a match that was like not exciting, it was like they had a note like, hey, let's talk about some of these protected rankings here. That's where it would go every time. So I'm sure we'll get more of that.
At the top of this quarter sits, I think, the person who got the absolute best of the draw here, Mr. Tsitsipas. I just don't see anyone really challenging him through this section. When we get to the bottom part of the quarter, I'm not really too worried there. And the names we just talked about in the third, I think he's favored over any of them. Am I wrong about that, Steve?
I think, yes, it's a great draw, but there's some sneaky good clay players kind of lurking around that could put a little bit of pressure on. I don't know. I just, it's a funny one with Tsitsipas. You look at his odds and look, what is he now? Second favourite to win the tournament. It's just like, he's drawn me in a couple of times in the past, and it's really hard to get excited about that price, knowing you have to sit on 5-1 for the first week and a half, and then watch it probably completely fall apart in a semi-final. Like I don't know. When you look back at his tennis, and you look back at all of his tennis recently at Grand Slams, his best tennis has happened when he's been down 2-0. Once the pressure's off. You look at it against Nadal, he came back and, was able to kind of use that momentum from sets 3 and 4 into the 5th set. I think he did, was it Roland Garros? Was he 2-0 down against Novak and then won the 3rd and 4th and got injured? I think in the 5th. I think his best tennis is when the pressure is off. Now the pressure's on. It's his quarter to lose. And I'm just fascinated to see how he starts against, Chardy's, capable of some pretty decent tennis on clay. Quarter and Martinez, that's not going to be a walkover second round. I mean, the third round's probably not great, but it's an interesting draw for me. And the way I kind of look at it is, I'd rather see how he goes through those first couple of rounds. I don't think his price is going to come in a lot unless Novak or Nadal fall over, I think, in the first couple of rounds. One match from this section that I am interested in watching is Marta versus Krajinovic. I think that's going to be actually a really underrated match, particularly if Marta is back to the form of a couple of years ago, and he looked really good in qualifying. Another one to keep an eye on is, I'm fascinated to see how Raonic goes off not a lot of tennis against Thiago Monteiro. I think that's going to be an interesting match, and one that may kind of shape, I think, that bottom chunk of players on the screen here.
And just to correct ourselves, Tsitsipas is the 3rd favorite. He's still behind Novak and Nadal. What do you think about this section, Candace?
I'll echo many similar things to what Steve said. I see him making it through several of these matches in a row, that being Tsitsipas. The price obviously is just not there, and that's maybe a theme of 2021 for him. That's only gotten worse with more success on his part, I suppose. I agree. Someone like Chardy is difficult for him. I think he'll be geared up because it's the first round, but players like that, I think, are the types that you worry about against Tsitsipas at a major, because he is somebody. Not only is he somebody who struggled to handle the pressure, which Steve alluded to, but I remember after Australia, and I spoke about it quite a bit here, but what I was so taken back by with him there is that he had a tendency to get very frustrated on court, and it would stick with him. And that's been my belief, with him since seeing him in Australia. Now, we haven't seen that pop up in the Masters 1000 tournaments he's been playing in, and when he's been playing quite well. I wonder if it comes back here at Roland Garros, best of 5. Not only a tournament that's puts pressure on because it's a major, but it's a tournament that puts pressure on because he has played really, really well. He's been that guy for, maybe a year and a half or so now, that kind of moved out of that group, right? It was like him, Felix, Shapovalov, and they were all kind of that next tier, and he's really separated himself from them. So he's going to be that natural alternative everybody is looking towards, and that inherently brings quite a bit of pressure, and brings pressure much earlier on in a tournament, right? If you're somebody who people are looking at as like, even a bottom end top 10 player, they're like, oh, this guy's, number 8 in the world or something. You'll get some attention as the tournament goes on, but usually not in those early stages. Tsitsipas at that point now where you're going to have all eyes on you from day one, and that's a change, and a big one at that. That's not to say he can't come through here comfortably. That's not to say he can't win the tournament. I just think for me, he's not a betting proposition, because you still have to take those, inherent concerns about him into account, versus someone like a Nadal or, even Djokovic. You don't have those same worries, right? We know what Nadal is going to bring to the table. We know that none of these things that we're talking about for Tsitsipas are issues for him. Even Djokovic, you probably have, at least I have, more belief he can bounce back into form and win a tournament like this than I would someone like Tsitsipas who's never done it. Because they've done it, they've shown it to us, they've proven it to us. So if you're going to go for someone at a short price, I mean, like I said before, I come from a horse racing world. I always say if you're really that keen on betting a favorite or someone at a short price, you better believe they're doing something that they've already done before. I'm just never going to be an advocate for taking a short price for somebody trying to do something that they've never done.
Yeah, I think that's a good argument, from a betting perspective, given where he sits from an outright. But I just, oh man, this section looks so easy to me. I mean, you guys are right about him maybe faltering kind of as his first time expected to win the quarter, but this section's really easy. And if we're ready to jump into the bottom of the quarter, I mean, there's no one down there that really scares me at all. So I have Tsitsipas, just simply based on how easy I think this draw is. I mean, you look at this bottom section, he gets out of that top. He plays Christian Garin. Who do you have coming out of here, Steve?
My first instinct is Garin. And he's probably going to be a trading selection. Well, he's a trading selection for me. It's hard to kind of make, the bottom four names there, Tommy Paul, Christopher O'Connell, Alexander Bublik, and Daniil Medvedev. That is a fun four players, and who knows what's going to happen between those four. But I think if you're looking at a player to kind of make their way through this section here, I think Garin's a pretty good look. The question mark with him is over the best of five, but it's hard to make a case for anyone else there unless Riley Opelka serves out of his mind for a week. I'm going to preface this because he killed me in 2019. Daniil Medvedev isn't that bad on clay. Like, he's not that bad when he wants to kind of lock in and be a part of it. He's playing this whole I'm not very good at clay shtick, but like he beat Novak in Monte Carlo in 2019. He went on a run there. He's actually not that bad. He's taken all the pressure off himself. Am I going to back him? Probably not. Don't really want to get involved because I don't know how he's going to handle things mentally. But that Bublik versus Medvedev match has the potential to be 6-love, 1-6, 6-1, 2-6, 6-love, and go under. Or it could be four tie breaks and a 10-8. It's a fascinating little section. But if you had to pick someone on the recent form, you'd have to go Garin, wouldn't you?
I think you do. What do you think, Candace? Is someone else we all like and back quite a bit, ready to win in these best of five conditions?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that you'd have to go Garin. He brings the most consistency as of late to the table. I agree that the stamina, best of five over a number of weeks in a row is a concern. The match that's going to be the most interesting to me, if it does formalize, and who knows if it will, because you have Dimitrov there towards the top. But if you were to get Garin against potentially the winner of that Guido Pella, Daniel Galan match, that could be interesting because you have two guys who are fluent on the surface and who don't bring anything incredible to the table, but they're just going to be there and bug you. I think that's the kind of match that I really want to see Garin make it through in a best of five. So if that formalizes there, that would be first, second, third round. I'd be really keen to see that, not only just for this tournament, but to kind of see what level he's at in the major scope at this point of his career.
Go ahead, Steve.
Looking to this section, and I'm just using Bet365's odds as a kind of guide at the moment. So the only two players below 8-1 to win this quarter are Medvedev at 5.5-1 and Tsitsipas, who's $1.72. So what's that about? Minus 140?
Yeah, 145.
Surely there's something around, like Garin's 10-1 to win the quarter. Would you take that knowing that there is a decent chance of him being in the quarterfinal? Do you take that?
It sounds appealing, but there's something in the back of my head holding me back. I kind of like what you said, Candace. This section might be a little tougher than we think for him. And then, Medvedev is just a very good tennis player. Yes, he's been complaining a lot about having to play on clay, and has been frankly terrible since 2019. Loses first round in Hamburg, loses first round of Roland Garros in 2020, and he's just 2-2 this year with a win. I'm sorry, he's just 1-2 this year with his first win in Madrid against ADF in 3 sets, and then lost to Guerin. So Guerin's actually already beat him this year, but I'm just not ready. I don't know. And again, whoever comes through the section has to beat Tsitsipas, I think. It gets a little tough.
Or do you look for someone a little bit longer who...
Well, I was going to ask, what is Dimitrov?
Yeah, that was going to be my next point. So he's 16-1.
Yeah, I mean, that was the one I was interested in. I know this is not his best surface, but he is somebody who I feel like in those types of scenarios you can get odds for because he doesn't care unless he's in the majors. So you expect his form to take a step forward in that regard. And you just wonder if it comes to him against Guerin, does that experience come through? That would be, I'd be more inclined to take Dimitrov at 16 than Guerin at 10.
And I think with Dimitrov, I think he played Tsitsipas last French Open, and I think there was at least one set that was a really, really long tiebreaker. There was a couple of moments there where things really could have gone easy, and Tsitsipas got the better of basically all of them. I feel like it's one of those ones where I look at Dimitrov and I'm like, look, I could probably take that 16-1. I'd much rather take the 16-1 than get involved at like a minus game handicap against Giron in the first round and watch him lose. It's kind of one of those ones like, do you make that play at that bigger price and just avoid getting involved in any Dimitrov matches for the first week? Or I think I prefer that than trying to kind of find him rounding into form. But I think when you look at it, I think he should at least be in that third round with Guerin. And then it's kind of, you can probably, choose your own path really from there.
I'm just going to do the part you said where we avoid Dimitrov. I'll just do that one. It's just a rough section again. And anybody who comes out of here is looking at Tsitsipas in the quarterfinal. Like, honestly, if I had to pick somebody, it might be Medvedev at 5.5-1, given how easy his little section is before he gets to Guerin or Dimitrov. So, given that I just said that, we're probably done with the fourth quarter. Anybody else have anything?
Now I just want to know what all these guys' odds are. Like, I'm sitting here like, I wonder what that guy is. I wonder what that guy is.
It's tough. There's quarter prices up a few places, but not everywhere yet.
We didn't. We should mention though. We didn't mention him at all, probably because he's playing Opelka here in the beginning, and this is a significantly much more difficult tournament. But I do want to give. I mean, not that he's watching or cares, but I did want to give a slight kind of nod there to Andres Martin. I know we've mentioned him a little bit towards the beginning of the clay court swing as somebody who mostly plays challengers but has had some success on clay. He had a really slow time coming into the season, but obviously we saw him really turn it around here in Belgrade too. I mean, he even took a set off of Djokovic for whatever that means at this stage, but had a couple of nice wins. I mean, beating Basilashvili earlier in the week as well. So somebody to keep an eye on, maybe for that first round match against Opelka, it could be a little bit interesting if he's able to carry that form forward.
Yeah. I think he is the kind of player who can kind of get into it. So he's 2-1, I think, to beat Opelka. I remember when he was kind of just edging his way into kind of, Grand Slam, kind of the Grand Slam scene a couple of years ago. He played a really competitive match against Milos Raonic. I think it was at the French Open. And he is someone who can kind of, show. It's a tricky one because I say that and he's able to lock in and kind of find a way. But then also, he was plus 7.5 games against Novak Djokovic, won a set and still didn't cover by a game and a half. Mm-hmm. So it is hard to make a case, I guess, in some ways in that regard. Now, let's go to our picks for the men's before we jump into the women's. We'll start with you, Alex. Who is your pick as your ace for the tournament?
Well, I don't know. You guys beat him up there for the last few minutes, but I'm still going with Tsitsipas simply just because he has the easiest draw. You look at the top half, those big names have to duke it out to get to the final. I think Tsitsipas moves through a pretty manageable quarter. I'm not too afraid of who's coming out of the third quarter, whether it be Zverev, whether it be Thiem or someone else kind of there as a surprise. And he's been very competitive. I think he has a real chance to be competitive with Nadal, possibly even beat him in that final. And just because I know he's going to be there, frankly, I'm taking him to win. I think that Novak-Nadal match is going to be close as Novak finds some form over the first kind of week and a half here. So give me the Greek.
And it is that case of, look, if there were ever a time for him to do it, this is by far and away his best opportunity so far. It's just a shame that his price is now single figures compared to all the times jumping on him at 20s and 30s and 40s. But that is the life of following tennis and following the betting markets, I suppose. Candice, who's your ace for the tournament?
My ace for the tournament is going to be Rafael Nadal. The irony is Alex's case for Tsitsipas was that he has the easiest draw. I think Nadal has the easiest draw, at least making it up to the semifinals, or to the quarters. Then presumably he could play Djokovic. But again, if you're going to say the big three players here are Tsitsipas, Nadal, and Djokovic, far and away the one that, if you had to have me pick one that's most likely to lose early, it would be Djokovic. I've just been so pleased with Nadal's level as we've really kind of extended our way into the clay court season. And again, the concern for him is always kind of those early round matches in majors, because he can kind of ease his way into the tournament, and I don't see anybody here that's going to bother him. I'd love to see him against Djokovic again in the semis, but we'll see how it goes to get there. I love his draw before that. Whereas the other two kind of big names have maybe a match or two there early on that I'm like, that person might be able to beat them. I don't see that there for the Spaniard.
And yeah, Sucre, hammer that 17-1. That's way off market. He's like 5-1 everywhere else. I don't know where you are or how much you can get.
Yeah, that's wild.
Anyone know anyone else in Portugal? Anyone?
Yeah, we'll send you some money.
Yeah, we will figure that out. Now, my ace for the tournament, I'm just going to go back. There are a couple of comments, and thanks for everyone who's been adding comments in to the chats. I think it was Lachlan Hall earlier had, am I stupid for just going hard at Nadal for the men's tournament at $2? No, I wouldn't call it stupid at all. I think, and looking to, I guess, the my pick here, I've also gone for Nadal, and it is hard not to. I went against him last year, and he made me look silly whilst I live streamed the final, I think, with yourself, Alex. So that was just a lot of fun. Always good to start off with a bagel. I think it was like a 50-minute bagel too, so it wasn't even a good one. Yeah, look, he's obviously the pick. He's so far and away ahead of everyone else. If he was, there's a couple of ways to look at it. Like I said, last year, no one got close to, I think Sinner got close to taking a set. Schwartzman took him to a tiebreak, but there was no genuine threat, I think, to his chances in any match there. Looking to, yes, he did lose to Rublev in 3 sets in Monte Carlo, but when you look at it, his serve was so far off, and I think his backhand was so far off, he still ended up in a 3rd set against Rublev. I think there are chances here. Yes, he is kind of finding his way, but he was also finding his way last year, I think, in Rome when he lost to Schwartzman. It's one thing to beat him or to get close with him in best of 3. It's a completely different ball game in best of 5. I think the play here, and it will kind of tie in with my other comments around some of the other sections, is I think you go with Nadal in the outright, and I think if you look to try and find kind of who he would meet in the final, I think that's the best approach here, and that's why he is my ace for the tournament. Now, we'll move on to our value picks. We'll start with you, Alex, again. This wouldn't involve Tsitsipas again, would it?
It would, and I didn't know that 17-1 still existed. That's my value pick if you live in Portugal. But for those of you that live everywhere else, where Tsitsipas right around 5-1, maybe a little bit less to win the tournament, he's plus 150 or better just to reach the finals. I start to look at those numbers and the case that I've made about his draw. I think that you're going to do much better betting that now at plus 150 than you will as you start to compile those money lines across the tournament. If he does make the final, again, it's 5-set, it's Roland Garros. If it's Nadal, he will be a pretty solid underdog in that final. If it is Djokovic, he'll be less so, but I think he still will be the dog in that final. So I am actually just going to bet him to reach the final. I just think that's a really nice number at plus 150 or better.
That seems more than fair enough. Now, have you found anyone else in the bottom half of the draw, Candice, as your value pick?
I have. I think for me, my value play is going to be RBA, Roberto Bautista Agut. It's funny because we talked through this tournament, and he isn't obviously who I have going the furthest, and there are several other players who, in my kind of made up little draw, I have going further than him, but none offer the same degree of value. I think he has a couple of kind early round matches. And then even if he were to go against someone like a Zverev, I think he's the right type of player to go against him, especially in a best of 5 and on this surface. We'll see how it went from there. If it was against, him against maybe the likes of a Ruud, that could be a really fun match. But in a tournament that is kind of empty of a lot of value, as we spoke about earlier, I kind of said it's so top heavy that what happens, and you'll see this around a variety of sports, this is not exclusive to tennis, but when you have, any kind of a sport that is really, really top heavy, what happens is that people partially want bigger prices. And then they also, there's, some level of ego in this with sports players, and everybody knows this. So they want to work away from favorites. And what happens is that next tier of guys, they end up being really, really overbet, right? And so then those next tier of players end up being unplayable because everybody's trying to look for this logical alternative to those 1 or 2 guys on top. And so you have a market that inherently is just kind of void of much value at all. I see that for the most part being the case here at the French, but he was the one who kind of stood out to me as somebody who is suited to the best of 5, suited to the surface, has a fairly kind draw early, could string together several matches. And I mean, he was sitting at triple digits for the outright. And you're saying that as somebody who also is sitting on the bottom half of this draw. I mean, to me, there's a lot of positives there. Is he the most likely to win the tournament? Absolutely not. Not even close. But you shouldn't see a guy like that sitting at 100-1 plus.
Yeah, look, and I agree with that. And my pick is in a similar kind of shape here. I've gone with Casper Ruud down the bottom in the bottom half as well. I think he has the game on the clay to be a genuine threat here. I think that's the looking to. I think he did struggle against Team last year, but he had his chances, I think, early to kind of take advantage of Team and couldn't convert those. Then you kind of fast forward. He's looked pretty solid, I think, through the last couple of weeks. His game, he hits with a lot of spin. He hits with a lot of margin. And him and Tsitsipas down the bottom are kind of the 2 players you'd probably say play with arguably the most margin, considering the power that they've also got in their game. So I think they're probably, looking at that price then of Ruud, I think he can knock off Team. And if someone else can knock off Team along the way, or Team's not at 100%, fantastic. Instead, then I'd be looking to think that, Ruud, I think, can knock off Alexander Zverev. And I don't think the price, I think the price is value at the moment when you look at the current markets. If we jump now into the unforced errors, we'll start again with you, Alex. Who is your unforced error for the tournament?
As much as I kind of liked your pitch about him being a little underrated, you did a good job of setting up my unforced error, and that Daniel Medvedev, whether he's faking it or not, has said several times that he does not like to play on clay. My game doesn't suit clay. There's nothing I like about clay. I'm not hiding this. I don't like clay. I don't think beating me on clay is a giant headline. Those are all things that he said. And all I had to do to find that was just Google Daniel Medvedev clay comments. That's how easy it is to find him talking about how much he doesn't like playing on clay. He has a kind of a manageable section here, but it's a Grand Slam tournament. It's going to take a lot out of him. He's going to have to play a lot of clay tennis if he wants to win this week. So I'm going to give him a pass.
Fair enough. Candice, who have you gone for as your unforced error? I'm going to go with the fact that Candice is on mute, but we can pop the banner up on the screen for those who are watching along. Who's your unforced error, Candice?
Every time. It always happens once. I said I'm going with the obvious, Roger Federer. I don't think this is a surprise to anyone. One of us had to go that way, so I volunteered for it to be me. Obviously, as Alex alluded to earlier, he doesn't seem that interested in playing clay court tennis. I think he's just out there playing to get his fitness in order for the grass swing that we know means a lot more to him. So I wouldn't expect a ton from Federer here. I think if he were to win a match or two, that would be nice.
Perfect. Sounds good. And yeah, look, obviously playing not a lot of tennis and then losing to Andahar, probably not the best lead-up form if you're coming into best of 5. I think
he got a set, I think.
Yeah, he did. And yeah, I think he was up a break in the 3rd, but I feel like his eye might be on a certain tournament on grass in a couple of weeks' time. Now, my unforced error, shock horror.
I was going to say Queen's Play, then Alex beat me to it.
Funnily enough, I've gone with Jens Liu. Is this the last one? Surely this is the last one. It has to be the last. You hope not. I know. If he beats Diego, I don't know what I'll do.
I'll cheer. You should at least bet on him. You'll make some money.
Now, I'm looking forward to watching that one on ×2 speed, and I'll be done in half an hour. Look, it's great that he's furthering his career after his shoulder issues a couple of years ago, but I just don't understand how or why. Like, he's not playing any lead-up tournaments. It's obviously not a genuine comeback. Good on him for kind of rorting the system that's there at the moment, but yeah, it's just a bit crappy.
We could talk ad nauseum about the tennis ranking system, but let's move forward.
Who is your overvalued player for the tournament, Alex?
Mr. Alexander Zverev. Look at his position in the draw. It seems kind of like a loose quarter, but it's a Grand Slam. It's best-of-5 tennis. He's going to collapse like he does every single time. I don't see him beating Rafa or Djokovic if he does somehow make the final. Happy to get a pass on him this week. I think it's absurd that his number is less than 20-1. So don't bet on him. Just don't.
And I've got the same overvalued player. So just rewind and listen again to what Alex said, and I agree with him on that one. Candice, who's your overvalued player for the tournament?
Well, the irony of my overvalued player is that it was a Steve's value player. It's going to be Casper Ruud. I mean, again, we're all fans of, we're part of the Ruud gang over here. Love the kid. Think he's great. Norwegian, fun together. I got this. I like him a lot. I do think he makes a run in this tournament. I do think that he wins plenty of matches. I just think the price is too short. You know, he's in a nice portion of the draw and that he's in the bottom half. But when you're talking best-of-5 and when you're talking a player who, you know, even when we've seen him have success over this clay court swing, he'll win match. Then he plays somebody who's kind of that upper tier, and he gets just drilled off the court. I just don't think he's there yet. And so, again, kind of parlaying off of what I said with RBA, who maybe isn't, you know, he isn't proven in a major either. I'd rather have someone like that at 100 or 120-1 than 50. And I think if you're playing him at 50, you're playing him off of potential and what you think he's going to be versus what he is today.
I think we need to backtrack. Is that going to be our new motto for Casper Ruud? Norwegian fun together.
Yay! I'll put my
like
flag.
that.
Put my flag back here.
We're all
not wrong, Candice, but I'm not happy about it.
Sorry.
I'm not happy either. I think it's actually quite rude.
Good. Oh.
All right. I think that wraps up the men's section. Shall we move on to the WTA?
Look at Alex.
Hopefully we can, because this
I just noticed
destroyed Steve's computer a few times.
He just kind of really sat up in his chair a little bit more than
I
said that.
Smile.
He just kind of was a little bit of like,
well, it was after I slumped down from your lame rude joke. Like, how about of course I look better after you do that. It's like,
you got through 53 minutes of men's tennis, and this is your reward. Talk us through the first quarter.
Again, this is going to be a theme as we've had with all the women's draws. They start off really well, and well, at least this one's interesting when we get to the end. But Ashley Barty's our 1 seed. She is second favorite at this point to win the tournament, which makes all the sense in the world to me. If you look at this quarter, there might be a couple challenges along the way. Was really inspired by the way Goff looked on clay. Really inspired by how Svitolina's honestly looked this year. Mahova, if she's able to be healthy, could be really interesting here. But at the end of the day, this is Barty's quarter. I don't really see anyone capable of beating her, you know, even if she brings a B level instead of, you know, kind of the A+ level we're used to from her. I was joking with some people the other day about how hard it is to find consistency in the WTA, but she's about as consistent as anybody. She brings a very good level every time she plays. The errors are fairly low for her. And, you know, as I look through this again, I don't see anyone that can really upset the apple cart and keep her from making the semifinals. What do you think, Candice?
I guess I just don't necessarily look at it the same. I mean, obviously, I really respect her ability. I do think this is a difficult quarter. However, Coco, you guys know I've suddenly became a fan of hers over the clay court swing. I think she's played very, very, very well. I look for her to win a couple of matches here. Svitolina, I have been encouraged by what we've seen from her, and she's always, one of those ones that could be tricky. If it did come down to something like her and Coco, I think that could be a fascinating match because they're both so different, and I think we've only seen them play each other once. That being said, neither of them are necessarily the most trustworthy players, especially in majors, and that's what you're dealing with here. I find this quarter fascinating, but not really a betting opportunity. I think there's a little bit too, versus Alex, who thinks it's just a done deal. I actually think this quarter brings a little bit too much potential for chaos for me to be interested in someone from an outright perspective for the quarter. I have it down as Coco, but I wouldn't be necessarily betting her in that regard, especially after her recent success. I just don't think the number is there anymore. I think you needed to be on that prior to her winning recently in order to get the value you really deserved. So I love this quarter from a tennis fan's perspective to watch. I kind of hate it from a betting perspective.
It's tough because it's as much as you like Goff, she's probably still a little too young. Again, Mahova's not totally healthy. But what do you think, Steve?
I think there are 3 seeds here vulnerable in round 1.
Yes.
I'll see if you agree with me on this. Jennifer Brady is one. I think Sevastova is capable there. On Jabeur, playing Putintseva first up. And the third one is Coco.
You love Putin, man.
I am a big fan.
He does.
I was on her the other day to beat Samsonova, and I would have preferred her not be down a set and a break and then down a break in the third set. But she came back and won. I think she won 6 in a row to finish it. She came from 5-love down against Ruse in the first set and took it 7-5. She's a confidence player with confidence. She's won a doubles title and backed that up by qualifying back here at a main draw. She has shown that she can be a giant killer at Grand Slams before. I think she knocked off, was it Petra in the US Open, like out of nowhere? I don't know. I'm just looking at it. $6.50 or 5.5 to 1 just seems a little bit long. I know Coco won that last tournament, but how many times? Like, where do we rate winning a final against Wang Jian again? Like, where does that stack up on clay? If we're being honest, when you look through it, her biggest threat was probably Kai Kanepi in the first round. And that was a couple of tie breaks. I just think that there's a little bit of vulnerability there. What I am hoping to not see here is Bernardo Pera beat Ash Barty in round 1. I feel like that's going to be something that is going to probably haunt me. I do think Barty is a great spot here. I think when you look at the other players, I think she's got the wood over Pliskova on clay. I think she can beat Svitolina on clay. I don't see anyone else here. If she is close to 100%, I think she is the one that gets out of here.
Yeah, again, I agree with that. That makes all the sense in the world. It's just tough to draw it up. If Goff were a little bit older, if Mahova were healthy, maybe this would be tougher, but she should be a comfortable favorite the whole way through. Any other thoughts from you guys here on the first quarter?
No, I think the only thing, just a quick shout out to, I think it was Josh Gross on Twitter, who I think that was one of the bookmakers, mixed up the Pliskovas.
Yes.
I think they got their Christinas and their Carolina Pliskovas mixed up and managed to get Pliskova in triple figures at 100 and something to 125 to 1. So well played to him. But yeah, look, it's hard, I think, to, unless you're a big Mahova fan, to cause another upset. I think it's Barty's if she's fit.
Yeah. We move on to the second quarter, where it feels similar to the first one, maybe even more strongly so. You've got Iga Swiatek there coming off a title in Rome. She is the defending French Open champion. She is the market favorite at 2.5 to 1. You look at her section, there's nobody too difficult there. We'll get to Muguruza at some point, but will be a favorite there, even if Muguruza is there and playing her best tennis. And then, the other half of the quarter, Canada's looked like a mess. Mertens probably isn't good enough to beat her. Maybe an Ostapenko sighting. What do you think, Candace?
I don't want to hear that because every time I think it's an Ostapenko sighting, she loses in like the first round because that's my tennis fandom life. That's what we deal with here sometimes. Yeah, I mean, I could see her beating Kenin. We'll see how it goes. It's certainly more than capable of doing it. You just don't always know what kind of level. Well, you don't know what kind of level you're going to get from either of them sometimes. So a little bit of a toss up there. I had Jessica Pegula winning a couple of matches in this spot. I think that first round should be okay. Even second round shouldn't be too crazy. You know, then coming out of there, whether it's like Kenin, Ostapenko, even a Blinkova, gets a little bit more difficult, but I just still think with her power, she should be able to make her way through that. So Pegula is a touch interesting for me in this section. And for me, she was the one who I had making it through kind of this top portion of it. And when you're looking down towards the bottom, I thought it got a tad bit more murky. I found it more difficult. Ultimately, I had Pegula making it through the spot, which is not something I don't think I would have thought I would say at the French Open if we were asking me back in February or January. But I think this is a nice little spot for her. She meets a couple of players potentially who are a touch out of form, and maybe some who aren't necessarily very suited to the surface. She might end up having to play someone like a Mertens here, and even when you're talking about a major tournament and you're talking about a first, second, third, fourth round match, it gets a lot harder than Mertens. If that's the most difficult you're going to play in your first 4 rounds, then I think you have yourself a pretty decent draw.
Yeah, I agree there, and I just saw Sucre pop. I like Kostic in that first round match. I think she could be very competitive against Muguruza, who may not be 100% and hasn't played well in the last few weeks. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, look, I think that's a great spot for Kostyuk, and I've been a big fan of opposing Muguruza when she's not at 100%. I've said that a couple of times. I think she needs to be all systems go, 100% confident in her body and her movement to be able to find her best tennis, and we just haven't seen it recently. And Kostyuk's gone from strength to strength this year. Looking at this quarter overall, I think if you break it down 8 players at a time, Kenin Ostapenko, I got really excited when I saw that, and then I saw that Ostapenko was a heavy favorite, and I got less excited about it. It's hard to kind of see where Kenin gauges herself here. She made the final last year, and her lead-up form then was copying a double bagel to Azarenka. So, it's hard to kind of gauge where she is at. Ostapenko could be very, very hit and miss there, and I don't generally get involved with her as a favorite in matches, so I'm probably going to avoid that one. But I think the winner of that match probably plays Pegula in the 3rd round, looking there. Looking to the second 8th, I think with Mertens I think there's still some question marks maybe around her level after retiring a couple of weeks ago to Sabalenka. I think this is a great little section for Sakkari. My big worry with Sakkari, and I've talked her up so many times and she's disappointed me more times than I'll care to admit, but she's in a little section here where she's not going to be blasted off the court. There's no one there that I think is going to be a genuine threat here. I think through to the quarterfinal, and I think she's actually a decent kind of chance through this little section here to beat Zavatska. I don't think Zavatska does. I think she's like a mini version of Sakkari, but I don't think she does anything significantly better. Paolini Vogeli, I'm not really worried about. It'll be basically Sakkari Mertens, I think, in that 3rd round there. As I said, happy to play around Muguruza in the 3rd lot of 8 players. Petra Martic is an interesting one, I think, given that she's shown some form recently, but it's hard to get involved in an outright with her. The bottom 8 here of this quarter is where it kind of gets a bit interesting, and it gets interesting for a couple of reasons. One, Swiatek is obviously the favourite for the tournament. We've seen a couple of players really struggle backing up and defending their own title. I think recently it has been a struggle, I think, for players kind of coming to terms with this a little bit. I don't think it'll be as much of an issue for her. It's a sneaky first round, I guess, opponent in Yuvan who, is capable of playing some pretty decent tennis. I think they may have actually played each other. They played each other in Melbourne, and I think Yuvan kind of, maybe ran her pretty close or maybe took the first set. I can't remember off the top of my head. Obviously,
I think Yuvan did take a set in Australian Open.
Yeah. So look, it's a sneaky first kind of round, and look, as much as I hate to say it, I want to say Annette Kontaveit. I don't like her from an outright perspective in terms of backing her personally, but if I'm playing around or trying to get Swiatek beaten, I think there's some players that can cause her genuine stress in this quarter. And when you kind of weigh all that up, I just think she's too short in the odds.
I think she's the pick to win, but I agree. I'm not going to back her at 2.5 to 1. And the other kind of bummer about this is you can't really back anybody in either of these quarters because they have to possibly beat Barty and Swiatek just to get to the finals here. It's kind of like the top half of the men's draw, honestly. I mean, it's really tough as you go through. You'd like to see maybe Mertens pop here, but we know that her level kind of runs out at certain points. Pegula would be fun, but it's probably too early there. Zachary probably just isn't at a point yet where she's good enough to win whole tournaments like this, and even bets to win the quarter aren't so much fun. But we'll see. There is going to be a bunch of good matches, though. I like a lot of the names here. That little section with Arabirena there and Tormo and Muguruza and Martic, I think will actually give us some fun matches. So we'll see. Any other thoughts here from you guys on the second quarter before we jump into the third?
I say we keep on moving on.
Serena Williams, our seed there at the top. Sabalenka, our seed there at the bottom. Things a little more open here, just simply because Sabalenka's had some success on clay this year, but those were in tournaments at altitude or indoors. We're going to be outdoors. We're going to be in really slow clay here. Not the best conditions for her, but if she was going to win a quarter at the French Open, why not this one, Candace?
Yeah, definitely the potential. I'm certainly looking at her. This is not the most difficult quarter that you could find yourself in. So I could see her making a little bit of a run in here. I mean, obviously, when we talk about her, it's always just, can you trust her? Can you trust her to get it done? And I just don't, and I haven't for a long time. We haven't seen a ton of talk about Petra Kvitova, but I think she has as good of a chance as anyone in here. I'm not concerned about the qualifier in the first round. Then you're looking at, a lucky loser or Vesnina. Shouldn't be too difficult for her either. Maybe Stojanovic after that. Maybe it gets a little bit tougher if Rybakina makes it through. But I think this is pretty open for Petra, who is just a little bit more proven, and conditions should be suited to her. Obviously, she doesn't always have it that way, especially when you talk the beginning of the year and it's much warmer in some of those hard court tournaments. So I like Petra in here. I think she's the kind of model of consistency in a quarter that has many players who are difficult to trust.
Yeah, I wish Rybakina were in any sort of form. This would be an interesting spot to see her and Kvitova kind of duke it out for that side because, Serena really hasn't been playing much. She did get a win, but it was against, I can't remember if it was a wild card or a qualifier, but someone ranked well and far away from her, hundreds of spots away from her. And, wins a match or two, I'm sure, but I don't know if she makes it much past round 3. And if she does, Kvitova will probably be there. What do you think, Steve?
I feel like when you look at Serena and you look at this kind of section of the draw, like you can kind of go, well, maybe she could make a run. But then when you look at her kind of clay form again, it's not fantastic. She has kind of withdrawn from this tournament in the past, kind of out of the blue. So it really is hard to make a case for her, I think, here. Obviously, the big name is Sabalenka. Really tricky. It's going to be an interesting first round match, and it's going to be, I feel sorry for the tennis balls with Sabalenka and Conja kind of playing first up there. It's going to be a really interesting one to watch. I agree with Candace. I'm kind of leaning and looking towards Petra Kvitova here, I think, in this quarter. I've kind of jinxed a couple of players this year. I've backed Azarenka multiple times and she's withdrawn during the tournament. I've backed Halep multiple times and she's been injured each time I've backed her. I hope this isn't the case this time, but I just can't get involved with Azarenka as a result. I think when you look to it, I think Kvitova is probably the biggest threat to Sabalenka. And I think when you look at it and you think, well, they would be meeting in a quarterfinal, Sabalenka is starting to head to unfamiliar territory there in the second week. Petra has obviously been there, done that all before, and they'd probably be playing on centre court there. So I think, that the conditions might be a little bit better there for Petra. And I think at her odds kind of being 3 times the size of Sabalenka, I think that's where I lean here.
I wish she had a little more form coming in. The only thing I'll other add is the section if you're watching right now on the top right there with Azarenka, Towson, Fernandez, Potapova, and Keys is going to be really fun. I'm excited to watch some of those matches. Curious to see if, Keys, who's had success here and in Rome in slower conditions, can kind of pull something out. Usually she has better form here. Towson got lucky with Badosa being pulled out of that spot. Curious to see if she can find a little form. And like you said, Azarenka has been playing much, but that's kind of what she does, and then shows up and makes a run at tournaments and has some better clay numbers than maybe people give her credit. So whoever comes out of there, I think will give Sabalenka a little bit of a test, but I think we're going to see a Sabalenka Kvitova quarter here, and I'm leaning towards the Belarusian, if you will.
And I think a couple of players I think that are unseeded that I'll be keeping an eye on early is Anastasia Potapova, I think against Leylah Fernandez. I think that match will largely be on her racket. And the other one is Kozlova using her protected ranking against Tomljanovic. I think Tomljanovic looks a little bit too short on the lead-in form. So I guess they're kind of two to keep an eye on. As well as trying to find a way to oppose Pavlyuchenkova given her recent injury struggles.
Indeed. All right, guys, let's jump into the fourth quarter, where I kind of hinted at earlier. It's not the best quarter, but it might be the most interesting, and that it's the hardest to try to pick apart here. And we do have some fun names. Andreescu played 2 matches and then withdrew as precautionariness or whatever for an abdominal injury. If she's healthy, I mean, this could be interesting, but Zidansek is tough. They put Serrano there in the qualifier spot. You look around here, Anisimova Kudermetova is probably the best first-round match possibly of either tournament, men's or women's here. The next section you come down, you've got Bencic Podoroska, I think a really nice spot for the Argentinian there. Other side of the draw, we have Osaka, who we know is not going to be doing any press conferences and might not have to pay too many fines given this draw and really just how much she struggled on clay, especially here and in Rome. Again, these slow tournaments. Badosa gets moved into that section, which I think is really interesting. And then you look at this other section here, not nearly as fun. Maybe a couple of years ago, I don't know if this was 2019, and we had Bertens, Herzog, Siegmund, Garcia, Kanepi, and Vondrasova. Boy, that would be fun, but it's 2021, Steve. What say you?
Yeah, look, I think adding Badosa in here made this a lot more interesting than it was a couple of days ago. I think when you look at it overall, yeah, Andreescu, she did say that she had, was a quote, a little bit of an ab tear. The last time we heard that was Novak Djokovic, I think, at the Australian Open. So it's hard to kind of really gauge there, but she probably doesn't have as much form coming in here. Looking to the rest, I think Badosa is probably a good look here in terms of the spot that she's taken in the draw. I think it's a great spot there. Flip it to the other side. There's a couple of names. I'm a little bit disappointed that Kudermetova and Anisimova are playing in that first round there. But look, Castella is one who could kind of knock off Konta in the first round and make a little bit of a run. Kasatkina is probably a tricky matchup and won't be blown off the court, I think, through those first couple of rounds. So it'll be interesting to see how she goes. Yeah. But look, it is wide open because, Osaka is the top name there, and it's hard to it's hard to get us excited about Osaka on form and behavior on court and off court. So we'll see what happens there, but I don't anticipate her paying too many fines for the week.
How about you, Candace? Who do you see winning probably the most open quarter of the draw?
I think it is easily the most wide open corner of the draw. I mean, not only because of Osaka, but you have Andreescu as well, who's fitness after her illness and everything was a little bit in flux, I suppose, especially when you're, again, talking about a pretty demanding surface from a fitness perspective. I know we were talking about this section yesterday, just kind of privately amongst us. I think Steve's getting ready for, big celebrity Steve was getting ready for an appearance to talk about his betting tips. And Steve said, who do you guys think gets through the fourth? And we think we threw out about 6 different names. I mean, that's how wide open this section really is. I mean, and you could go further. I mean, someone like a Caroline Garcia, we talked about her a bit last week. Could she make a bit of a run here? I could see it happening. Ultimately for me, I wound up having Badosa going through just because, again, model of consistency in a sea of chaos. And I've been really taken with her form as of late. She's been playing well. She's been coming through in big moments. Obviously, this is a different level of the tournament. But needless to say, from what we've seen of her, I've been impressed. So I wound up going Badosa. The player who I'm going to be really interested, though, to watching in this section of the draw is going to be towards the top. And that's going to be your wild card, Osorio Serrano. Just interested in her right off the bat. If she were to make it through that first round against Rangel, I could see her being the one who takes down Andreescu right away. She looked strong from everything I saw in qualifying, and we've seen her play well throughout this kind of clay court swing, admittedly against some easier competition and easier players. But she is a player on the rise who has a ton of potential, and that could be a really big moment for her. Sometimes as a player, it's more difficult to play a big name when they might not be at 100% because you feel that pressure even more. But I'd love to see that match come to fruition.
Yeah, I've got a Badosa Podoroska quarterfinal here, and I really hope that's what happens. That would be super fun. Two young players that seem like they're kind of ready to ascend, especially on the surface. I'm still not ready to cross off Andreescu. There's an aura, there's a mysticism about that, and she didn't play anybody good, but she looked solid in her first two matches, and she could take advantage here. But I think it is Badosa and Podoroska. We see some youngsters pop here. Any other thoughts, guys, in the fourth quarter of the draw in general?
I think when you look at Andreescu, you probably want her to have a pretty comfortable round one to kind of ease her way into the tournament. I don't think she's going to get that with Swiatek, which does make things a little bit trickier for her.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you said, I'd be interested in backing her if she had a couple matches to kind of work her way into this, but it's going to start tough and stay tough.
Definitely. Shall we get right into our picks for the tournament?
Let's do it.
We'll start off with you, Candace. Who's your ace for the women's draw?
I am going to be going with Swiatek. When I first went through this draw, the first thing I thought was, wow, her route is easy. And you could never say that in a major, but this is as close to easy as you're going to get in a major. Maybe it makes it a touch uninteresting, but I thought Nadal's draw was very comfortable for the men, and I think you'd say exactly the same for her. So, in a tournament where you do have, in the women's side in general, and probably part of why Alex is such a fan, you do tend to have more chaos. You have those couple players on this surface who are ahead of everybody else, and she of those players, I think, very easily has the best draw.
Yeah, Alex, who have you gone?
I agree. It's not always that Candace and I are in line here, but she's got the easier quarter. She is the defending champion. She just won Rome in pretty impressive style. I think Barty can beat her, but simply because I feel better about I feel better about Swiatek winning the quarter by just a little bit. I'm going to take her here as my pick. I don't think you can go wrong, but the winner of that match wins the tournament. I think we'll see Swiatek win that match.
See, I've gone the other way. So I've gone for Barty at the longer odds, thinking I feel like Swiatek needs Barty to lose before they meet. That's where I'm kind of thinking it based on their recent meeting as well. I think there's more value, in that price with Barty. And then, as I've said that, probably Bernarda Pera is going to pull some performance out of the blue and be really clutch in all the breakpoint chances. But I think Barty is the play here. I'm probably not going to get involved with her matches, match to match too much. I think it's kind of take the price that's available at the moment and then look to some value, I think, in some of the other sections.
Yeah.
Moving on to our value picks. Alex, do you want to kick us off with your value selection?
Yes, Miss Paula Badosa here, and I think that we're getting a little lucky. Books have not or been slow to update for the fact that she used to sit in the third quarter, and she got moved. Once Allison Risk was pulled out, they put her down here in this fourth quarter in a really nice kind of juicy spot in the draw. I was able to get her at 30-1. I love that number. I think anything in the high 20s is pretty solid on her, given her form, given her position in the draw. This is just a great spot for her. And I think we're just going to have a lot of value. Again, at 30-1 or better, you can start to think about, kind of buying out or hedging as early as, the quarterfinals, honestly. So just really like her at her number, especially given this position.
Definitely. And look, I can't find an argument, I guess, for the other side here. I think it is certainly a value price. Now, Candace, who is your value pick?
My value pick is going to be Petra Kvitova. I think she provides value because she's in a section where you have a couple of higher ranked players who this is just not the spot for them, whether it's the surface, whether it's their current form. She's just kind of hidden in there a little bit, and she's not getting the attention that she probably merits based off her past success here. And again, another player whose draw just does not look overwhelmingly difficult, and conditions do seem like they're going to favor her. So I'm going Petra.
And answer that Bovada question. The answer is yes. Bovada is where you can get the best Badosa number because they still think she's in the third quarter.
I would make a move on that one. Now, my value pick, I'm the same as Candice. I've also gone for Petra Kvitova here. I think, as I kind of alluded to when we were talking through that quarter, I think when you look at it on the surface, she's 3 times the price, roughly, of Sabalenka. She's done it all before at Grand Slam level. She can. My biggest worry for her is someone catching her on an outside court in the first week in really windy, damp conditions and kind of getting the better of an error-ridden performance. I actually think once we get into the center court action of the second week in the women's draw, I think Petra becomes a really, really dangerous prospect. Added to that, probably even more so if the roof ends up being shut for any of her matches.
Yeah, that will definitely help.
So I think, again, she's another one of those, a bit like Barty. I probably won't get involved too much match to match. I'm not going to be taking any minus 5.5 game kind of action, I think, throughout it. But I think if you're taking, high 20s in the odds for the outright, I think just kind of make a small stake there and kind of see who she matches up with in the second week, were she to make it. Moving on to the unforced error, I'll just get mine out of the way early. She doesn't want us to talk about her, so I won't spend too much time. It's Naomi Osaka. Alex, who's your unforced error?
Let me take you back, and you might think this is going to take a long time, but I assure you it won't, to the last 2 years of clay matches featuring Serena Williams. We go to 2020, where she wins in the first round here in Roland Garros against Christiane in 2 sets, then pulls out, withdraws, and loses to Parankova. We come to this year, 2021. She loses in the first round in Rome to Nadia Podoroska, goes to Parma, where she beats someone named Lisa Pagato. All apologies to Lisa for not knowing who she is. She's in the 500 from a ranking standpoint, so sorry, I just haven't gotten that far down the list yet. Loses to Siniakova there in the second round. That's it. Those are all the clay matches she's played in the last 2 years. I'm not sure she's going to add to that list a whole lot this week, nor is she terribly interested. I wonder if she will do what she did last year, take her win in the first round, politely thank everyone for paying for the flight and all the pictures and stuff, finish up any press stuff and clothing appearances she has to do, and head home or wherever she's going to practice and get ready for the grass season. So going to give Serena a pass here.
I did watch, I think I have notifications on when the Roland Garros Instagram page goes live. It was some weird, they went live for 2 practice points of Serena, playing on center court. She just didn't look, I thought she was limping a little bit, but I'm a little bit biased, I think, with that. I don't know if it was just she was just kind of slouched after the point. She didn't look great. And you have to feel does a long fortnight here and potentially not getting the reward for effort, would that impact her? You'd have to think that Wimbledon's her big hope in terms of, trying to make that history from a Grand Slam winner perspective. Yeah. So we'll see what happens there. Now, Candice, who is your unforced error?
My unforced error is going to be Bianca Andreescu. Again, fitness perspective and, where is she at post-COVID? It's kind of a shame. I feel like she's, sometimes we have these unforced errors and we'll kind of make jokes because it's people who maybe been away or maybe something kind of funny happened. But I just feel bad for her. I mean, she's been very, very luckless on a number of fronts coming into this, and we know she has the ability and the talent. And I look forward to just being able to see that potential in the future.
Definitely. Now, moving into the overvalued players, we'll go back to you, Candice. Who's your overvalued player for the tournament?
My overvalued player is Naomi Osaka. I feel like when we did all of these unforced errors and overvalued players, we were like, well, it's obviously these 3. Everybody pick one. So obviously I was the first one to the overvalued players. I hopped on the Osaka bandwagon, but we know this is not her service. She has not been terribly interested in playing the service or, even making it through a couple of matches. She's already said she doesn't want to talk in the press conferences. And, I understand her reasoning why. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we've all listened to tennis press conferences before, especially at majors, and everything she said echoed as true. So I totally get it from her perspective, and I can't imagine how frustrating that would be, especially right after losing a match. But I think maybe it's also a little bit of a product of this is just not a tournament that she's terribly excited to be at, because she knows bigger and better things are to come forward as we get towards the back end of the year, whether that's at Wimbledon, whether that's at the US Open. Obviously, they provide her much more opportunities. And she's just one of those players at this point that she has a pretty loyal fan base and she has name recognition. So she's always going to be short, even at places where her chances of winning are very low.
Yeah, that seems more than fair enough. And it's interesting how the narrative with the WTA chat around the top of the rankings has changed from the start of the year. It was, well, how is Barty number one because she hasn't played enough tennis? And now it's, well, Osaka's only good on one surface. So you're kind of like, where do you kind of marry up here? And like, I think that, you know, things are starting to kind of, although the rankings are still a little bit skewed, I think it's pretty fair, I guess, how they are at the moment. Now, looking to your overvalued player, Alex, who have you gone for? I think you took mine away from me. I wanted this one too.
Oh, well, it's an easy one. Miss Garbiñe Muguruza, you know, we saw her retire at the end of Charleston with an injury. She did win 2 matches in Rome, beat up on Teague, which really isn't impressive. Probably should have lost to Pera, which has Steve still bummed out. Nobody holds on to a loss like Steve. And then lost to Svitolina pretty quickly there. She is the 5th, 4th, 6th favorite to win this tournament. She's right around 10-1. I don't understand that at all. I mean, she avoided the Barty Swiatek half of the draw, but outside of that, I mean, it's going to be rough sledding for her the entire way if she really is even in good enough physical shape to win this tournament. So I think this number is absurd. And as much as I'm not going to back her, and you shouldn't either, make sure you read my preview, which will be coming out shortly. It does offer a strategy to make some money on Miss Muguruza this fortnight.
Well, I'll have to upload that as soon as we finish here, and we can certainly all jump on and take a look at that one. Now, just to wrap up, I'm probably taking the hardest job here in trying to justify why Iga Swiatek is overvalued. I got on Iga in the French Open last year, and the decimal place was 1 spot further over, and it's just hard to get excited about the price that is there at the moment. Like I said, I think when we were talking through, I think she's reliant on Barty losing or pulling out hurt before the semi-final. I actually think Barty should be favoured in that particular matchup. I'm just not big on kind of backing in players at such a short price off, you know, when they're, you know, this is going to be the toughest task, I think, mentally for Swiatek, that, you know, she's now become the hunted. She flew under the radar, and I think that was part of the appeal of her kind of, you know, she gained so much momentum through 2020 Roland Garros. She basically knocked off Simona Halep and was then the favourite from there. But when you look through it, you know, like, it was a pretty good draw in that regard, and it did work out well for her. I can't get that excited by the price. That's not to say I won't get involved in some capacity at some point. I just think she's got a couple of tricky, kind of quirky matchups in the first couple of rounds. I just don't see her price coming in that much in the first week. Again, you know, Barty may find someone a little better than her, but I don't think, you know, I think there'll be enough threats in other parts of the draw. Where it gets tricky is that, you know, we talk so often about how wide open the WTA is, but there's only a couple who've really taken control and taken over, and there's a bunch of players who just don't win at Grand Slam level or don't win in the second week. It's just a matter of whether you can try and find it. And looking at the draw, you know, what is she at the moment? It's about 2.5-1, 3-1.
Yeah,
I just don't
3-1
see,
just about everywhere.
I just don't see that appeal. I got her last year, so if she does go back to back, I think it's great, and it's probably a sign that she's probably not too far away from being number one if she kind of plays a relatively heavy schedule. But it's just hard to get involved, and I think, you know, I'd be fascinated, and I'm really intrigued to watch her play Yuban in the first round. I might change my mind after those first couple of rounds, but it's just a little tricky, I think, for me to find myself getting invested in that price.
Yeah, it's hard to back anyone at that small of a number in a tournament, let alone this big of a field in the WTA, where it still is competitive. As much as it's a little more top-heavy than it has been over the past years, it's still a pretty competitive field. So hard to back anybody at that number. I think you're right there, Steve.
Exactly, and I think with the second favourite as well, also being in the same half, it does add for some intrigue. But again,
keep doing.
I think we've found.
I was gonna say that's Alex. That's been Alex's pet peeve for 3 months.
Can't we get a Barty Swiatek final? Come on.
I think looking at it, it's
They're
yeah.
getting better.
I think we found some value plays. It's the same case in both draws. And so we look at the men's, and you've got Nadal and you've got Novak up the top. Yes, people are complaining that the big three are all in the same half, but we can't put Federer in that basket on clay. I'm sorry, it just doesn't happen. The same thing happens here. We've got the two favourites in the top half. Pick your poison and try and find that player, I think, in the bottom half that is going to go on a run, and hope that, you know, there's a hero comes along in that top half that can knock off a Swiatek or a Barty. And, you know, we might be seeing the likes of, you know, Petra or Badosa really making a pretty firm run from the bottom half into the second week of the Slam.
Makes all the sense in the world to me.
I think that just about does it. Does it?
I have nothing else. I could try to
You
say some more
survived.
stuff, but it'd be, you know, okay, that's enough.
Also, just we'll finish with.
Yeah, I know. Beyond tech. I'm just gonna call her Iga. Might not be. I might be Iga. I don't know. It's tough. We try our best. If you can pronounce every tennis name right, let me know, because I will sit and make you do every stinking one of them, and I will bet you that you can't, because you can't. No one can.
Gosh, we should have like WTA,
No one even knows what the right
player
answers
Wheel
are.
of Fortune.
Spelling bee.
So that's where most of my anxiety stems from, is the mispronunciation. So that what could go wrong? All right. Well, I think that just about wraps up. Obviously, you know, this is just the beginning of a pretty big fortnight of tennis, and a big kind of 6 weeks, I think, with Wimbledon around the corner as well. So as Alex mentioned, I think his outright preview will be up very shortly on the website. We'll try and get some kind of plays and previews, kind of snippets across the slams. I think hopefully we can kind of put together some picks, you know, a couple of days across the slam between the three of us, and, you know, we can try and find a way to kind of oppose Muguruza, because we all seem to want to do that. And yeah, look, it's my previews won't be on the website. They'll be on the Betfair hub for this particular tournament, and I'll have a number of daily previews on there. And then on the website, the rest of the daily previews, and we'll probably bring back the lists in the early stages of players who should win, for those who love a multi or a parlay, because there seems to be a few of those people around. So I will give the people what they want, because I seem to get this question it's that fortnight. That happens 4 times a year. So we will work with that and try and come up with a lot of content over the next couple of weeks, and we'll try and, you know, we'll see if we can maybe jump on and have a chat, or maybe see if we can get some other people on to have a chat about the goings on in Paris over the next fortnight. Any last words from either of you before we wrap it up?
Go underdogs.
Go the underdogs. Alrighty, we will leave it there. Good luck with all your picks for the upcoming fortnight. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with us at Eat Sleep Tennis on Twitter, or at each of our individual Twitter handles. And make sure, if you are listening, thanks to those who've joined and been a part of the comments here. It's been great to kind of interact with all of those across the last hour and a half. And if you are listening back on our podcast format, please give us a like, share, subscribe, rating, review, comment. There's too many different platforms with too many different ways to describe it. So whichever platform you're using, thank you very much for listening, and we will be back soon.